Persichetti, he taught at Juilliard for probably 30 years. He died, in the 70s, so he's been gone for a while. But the book remains, and people out there know about it. And I'm glad that you all are getting exposed to it, because you're really going to appreciate it. This is his words. Any tone can succeed any other tone. Any tone can simultaneously with any other tone or tones, or any group of tones can be followed by any other group of tones, just as any degree of tension or nuance can occur in any medium under any kind of stress or duration. Successful projection will depend upon the contextual and formal conditions that prevail and upon the skill and soul of the composer. Now that's wordy, but that's the way he writes. But in essence, he says, you can do anything you want. It's really what he's saying.
It's a great quote.
It is a good quote. You can do anything you want with music. Any combination of tones or chords can occur in any order, any which way you want to do it. And the big word to me is he puts soul in there. So it's really the soul, what we bring to it ourselves, our own feelings, and our own skill. So it's wide open these days, and it's been that way for quite a long time. So first, intervals. I also gave you a copy of this. This is on the handout, because this to me is kind of the basis, in a sense, certainly of this first chapter. Now, a lot of this we kind of understand. It's maybe a certain kind of common sense. But let's look at it, think of it in this way for this to start out with. So if we break down the basic intervals, basic qualities of the intervals, because really now, everybody know when I talk about common practice tonality. Common practice tonality was a tonality that existed from, let's say, Bach's time to about 1870, 1880, maybe even 1900. Right? It was with Bach, it's with Handel, it's with Mozart, all those folks, Brahms, everybody wrote, even Wagner to some extent, with certain common practice ideas, certain resolutions and certain dissonances, and certain functional harmony. Now, without getting into that too much, that got sort of destroyed, really. It got emancipated, is really what they call it. The emancipation of the dissonance happened around 1900. And we had Wagner, and we had Mahler, and eventually we had Schoenberg, and we had Debussy, and Scriabin, and a lot of these gentlemen broke open this mold. So now we can look at the intervals by themselves, without thinking that everything has to go back to some sort of home key. So if you look at these intervals, we can call a perfect fifth and octave open consonances, and that's going to be our open consonances here, kind of the yellow. Then a major and minor thirds and sixths, right? They're also they go both ways because they are going to invert, and that's a soft consonants. We most of us understand that too. Minor seconds, major sevenths are a sharp dissonant. So that's probably the sharpest, most dissonant interval that we're going to have over here. That's these two here, the sharp dissonances, boom and boom. Then we have major seconds and minor sevenths are dissonants, but they're milder. So that would be over here and over here. Now perfect fourth is something that we're going to get into because it can be consonant or dissonant depending on the context. And we'll get into that a little bit. And you all know that fourths always were considered, even in common practice tonality, as an unusual interval. Counterpoint, sometimes you could use them if it's moving, you couldn't use them in certain situations. So fourths always were a little bit, the classical composers weren't quite sure how to do fourths. They certainly didn't might have harmony in fourths, but they didn't really quite know what to do with fourths all the time. Now we have the tritone, right? It can be a diminished fifth or an augmented fourth. It's ambiguous. It can be a neutral or it can be a restless interval. We'll get into some more of that. So we have examples of this. One word, in the beginning when I started this course, I entered all the examples. And then I realized, my Lord, I'm not going to be able to do this. And then a friend of mine gave me all these recordings that he had made of these examples. So later on in the book, I'm using I'm using not as beautiful as this engraved thing, but it's still going to be okay. Just a word about sort of the layout of this. So the tritone and perfect fourth are perceived differently depending on the context. Everybody understands what I mean by context. It means the environment it's in. So when the tritone is in a chromatic context, it's going to sound neutral. That means it doesn't sound as much of a rub, but it's going to sound more restless in a diatonic passage. So let's play this first example, please. Let's try a little louder. Get the idea, right? So it's just a little example of what he is talking about, and in both contexts. Now the perfect fourth can sound consonant, kind of a reverse. It can sound consonant in dissonant settings and dissonant in consonant settings. And this is sort of, it seems to be a certain amount of common sense. Let's try that. So here, after all this chromaticism, it sounds like a little bit of a relief. And here, when it's more diatonic, it sounds like a dissonant passage. So we can use it both ways. Now, this is how a tension arrangement might sound, going from great tension, from light tension to little tension. So, do you want to play this, Brian? Brian's going to be my pianist du jour. Just kind of play it a little bit so we... Pardon me, the sound of the piano. But we don't have a piano here. So this is just going from, this is light tension to more tension in the end. Yes?
Can I ask you a question? Is there any way we're going to be able to access this stuff after the class, like in a PDF or anything like that?
Not going to be a PDF, but it's going to be the video.
Oh,
Because I want to put this together as a book, but I have to kind of figure out how much I'm going to do, and I don't want to just rip off Vincent Persichetti blindly, you know. But so anyway, so it's not going to be PDF quite yet, but it's all going to be video. Yes, you might have missed that part. Good. So this just kind of shows you. So we have the perfect fourth is here as it moves, and the tritone will be more tension. Okay. So let's listen to this. Now here is an example of how we might hear this. Okay. We're starting with the octaves, fifth, almost all these intervals just go in this approach, ending with the tritone. Needless to say, how useful this is for film music is just remarkable. You know, that if you can create a line that has tension moving just right within 4 measures, I think it's just a wonderful concept, because this could be expanded, of course, right? Each of this could be 3 measures. I mean, you could take this whole idea and subtly affect the tension rather than thinking so chordal. That's really what a lot of this is, getting away from chords, thinking much more horizontally. Now here, the tension pattern is reversed, right? So we're starting with the dissonant intervals on the left, and then we're going to the more consonant on the end, and the tritone at the end sounds more neutral than it does in this example. Tritone almost sounds like it's resolving, right? You know, it doesn't sound as like it needs to move. So we talked about it when the intervals are inverted, the quality changes depending on the interval. So inverting a fifth alters its basic function because now it becomes a fourth, right? So that is kind of, we understand. If intervals are larger than an octave, the soft consonances, the thirds and sixths, become richer. You know, like major tense sounds a little fuller, a little more to the sound. Open consonants, octaves and fifths, and perfect fourth become stronger sounding. Let's listen to that. I'm going to get a better audio thing for next time because this is not quite enough sound coming at us. Is it even better just out of the computer, you think?
Let's try it. No, it's even better.
Really? I have a better boombox. I'll get it. So
It's a big room.
yeah, it's a big room. Okay. Now dissonances, seconds and sevenths, become less biting when they're spread out over the octave, right? Because as you move them from the closeness, they don't have the rub that they're going to have when they're very close in. So we can see here these are sevenths here, kind of spread out a little bit. Here's an example of how a tension arrangement might sound. And remember, a tension arrangement is setting up your intervals by tension, consciously, from weak to strong. Let's play them again. Now the tritone, which is neutral in chromatic progressions, right? We talked about that. It becomes more ambiguous and veiled when it's spread out over the octave. So it's restless, we were talking about earlier in diatonic progressions. It becomes less restless if it's spread out over the octave. So most of the qualities become less intensive when they're spread out over the octave. Interesting orchestration, actually, isn't it? I mean, an orchestration I wouldn't recommend. I mean, let me say, I usually suggest to people that you have the second violin support the first violin, but this is what he wants. You see, so this is what's interesting because it is spread out over the octave. So we have these two voices that sound not as connected, and that's really the idea on that. Now, two or more intervals form a chord. Chords may be built with equidistant intervals. That means equal. Brian?
Boy.
Augmented. Right. No, this is not going necessarily in tension arrangement. This is just kind of showing you what equidistant chords might be. And these doesn't have to be our normal triads, do they? Now, here is, we can change it up a little bit. Now, it's not equidistance, right? We can have different qualities of the same interval. So we have different qualities of seconds, sevenths, etc. All right. Now we can mix the intervals. Right? So here we've got fifths and sixths. Doesn't have to be the same. Okay. Some interesting ideas. Now a three-note chord has three intervals. Note the different variations you can have in consonant and dissonant combinations. Hi. The donuts, make sure you guys get the donuts. Okay.
I'm gonna keep him in here.
Okay. So so here we have three consonant intervals. Now here's two consonant intervals and a mild dissonant interval. That's the seventh, right? Here's one consonant interval and two mild dissonant intervals. Two consonants and a sharp dissonance. Sharp dissonance, the major seventh. Yeah, break it out. Break them. It sounds like you can hear it. Right. Here's one consonance, one mild dissonance, and one sharp dissonance. And here's a mild dissonance and two sharp dissonances. So we have the half step and the major seventh, and then we have the major sixth. A four-note chord has six intervallic factors. And a 5-note has 10. So this is a major and minor sevenths. Ninth chord, right? Ninth chord. There you go, right. So the quality of the chord tension will be affected by dynamics. The medium, he means the texture, the environment of where the chord, how the chord is placed in terms of the instrumentation and such, and the spacing. All chords generally fall into one or two categories. These are chords that contain a sharp dissonance and those chords that don't contain a sharp dissonance. Then each of those categories can be subdivided into those chords that have a tritone and the chords that don't have a tritone. Okay? Now, here's some examples. So here are chords that have a tritone. They have more restless, right? Once again, because tritone has that restless feeling. It feels like it wants to resolve. We're so used to that. We've just been kind of hammered in our heads. So here is sharp dissonance. This first one has no tritone, and this has a tritone. Now here's no sharp dissonances, no tritone, minor 7th chord, and here is a normal 7th chord. Normal 7th chord. Okay. So we're trying to kind of understand how sharp distances and non-sharp distances are going to affect the sound, and how tritones are going to affect your sound and your writing. Now, perfect fourth, there's ambiguity because the interval's ability has a consonance or dissonance depending on its environment, right? We talked about that a little bit earlier. Now, the point he makes I think is interesting. The consonant-dissonant quality is defined by the interval formed by the bass note and the note not involved with the fourth. Okay, and when this interval is a mild or sharp dissonance, the perfect fourth sounds like an open consonance. When it's a soft consonance, the perfect fourth sounds mildly dissonant. So here's the fourth, right? The fourth is a C and F. So this sharp dissonance would be with the C and the D flat. So this is a sharp dissonant sounding chord. Remember, of course, it doesn't matter what you call it in your own writing. This is all for your own knowledge, just so you can be a little more educated about how you want to set up chords and get away from just 1, 4, 5 triads, on the simplest end. Now here's the fourth again, right? So now it's less dissonant because we have a whole step that's not in the fourth. Everybody see what we're talking about? Interesting. Now here again, next example. This is soft. Here's our fourth, and that's the major 6. And this is open, kind of the sound, because we got the fourth here, but then there's a fifth that's the other part of the chord that has a fourth. So fourths can affect a chord in different ways, but the point he's making is to really understand how the chord might sound is don't look at the interval of the fourth, look at your third chord member.